I'm Annette Lucas, and this is Up Front, a show where we'll take a look at the issues that concern you in your community. Today's topic concerns the people who live in Nanaimo. The City of Nanaimo has proposed to build an event centre at the cost of $80 million. Residents will be hitting the referendum polls on March 11th. Today I have 4 guests from the city to discuss the topic and provide some insight to help you make an educated decision on how to vote come March 11th. And I've got with me today Tracy Sauer, who is the Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Nanaimo, Victor Mema, who is the Chief Financial Officer from the City of Nanaimo, and Kim Fowler, the Chief Sustainability Officer, City of Nanaimo, as well as Brad McRae, the Chief Operations Officer, last-minute guest here. So thank you all for coming with us today and coming here and discussing this topic, which is generating a lot of discussion, I should say, in the community as well. No side, a yes side. And as I said, my goal is to provide some insight to help people make that educated decision. So thank you again. Now, $80 million repayable over 20 years. And I think that's kind of the forefront of what people are concerned about. How is this going to affect their taxes and how much it's going to cost the people in Nanaimo to build such a facility? So, Victor, you want to talk about the new business financial plan that was released?
Sure. We just put out a business plan, a detailed business plan yesterday. It's on our website. People can take a look at that. $80 million, we're going to borrow that money and we'll pay it over 20 years. What we had in December from community engagement was that if we're going to build this, it needed to be built but without property tax increases. So the plan that we've put together requires that we pay back about $5.4 million a year without affecting our property taxes. So we're going to use existing revenue sources and new revenue sources so that we keep our services going, at the same time not increase our property taxes.
And that has been repeated, but I noticed in the Ernst & Young, looking back at it, there was one comment in there that attracted my attention, and I'm just going to read what it said there. It said, staff is recommending that council considers adopting a property tax increment financing strategy whereby the city designate a portion of future incremental property tax from non-market assessment, et cetera, towards the debt service for the event centre. Does this mean that there potentially could be, if there is a worst case scenario where it doesn't generate the income?
No, I would let Kim answer that question, because what we're referring to, technical called tax incremental financing, what we're really looking at is once we build this, there's going to be other developments around the downtown area. And the planning people usually explain this better than the finance people.
Yes, the tax increment financing, we actually have already in the City of Nanaimo that authority. It's called a revitalization tax exemption in Canada. And that essentially allows for an owner of a property to redevelop their property with a tax exemption from 1 to 100% for 1 to 10 years. And so we already have that in place for hotels, for commercial hotel sites within downtown Nanaimo. And there is an opportunity for us to expand that as part of the downtown revitalization, which is really one of the key reasons for having the proposed event center coming through, because it is really a key piece to the revitalization of our downtown. So, and people said, well, why do you give them a property tax exemption or, a break? And it's because if you have, a vacant land or an abandoned building on a piece of land and you redevelop it, it becomes much more valuable. So the city gets a significant increase in its property tax income, and all we're doing is giving a portion of that back. So everyone wins in that case. The community gets a redeveloped site and new commercial or residential opportunities, and the city gets improved taxes, and the property owner gets a viable business.
I think some of the other things that have to be addressed, and it has been talked about, there's been numerous stories in the paper as well, and looking at the $5.4 million that has to be paid back every year. And I know you've explained it before, but I want just a brief explanation on how this affects the borrowing options for the city in case future things come up that we have to pay for.
Thank you. That's a good question. The City of Nanaimo, as noted in a cost service review report that we got last year around summertime, the City of Nanaimo has one of the lowest debt burden. The province actually sets through a formula what debt limits we can carry. Currently, we only carry about 13% of about $39 million per year. So if we added the 5.4, that will each it up to about 25%. So we're left with 75% of our debt service limit that can be used for emergencies or other projects. That's in excess of about $29–30 million a year.
people are concerned, and I know, and I've held this, and it's a concern of mine as well, being a resident of Nanaimo, in looking that it's not supposed to raise our tax dollars, and if you take away the surplus fund, the portion that was going to go into servicing the debt, and if something does come up in the future, then that would cause our taxes to go up because you'd have to borrow for that and we'd have to pay it back somehow. And I think that causes confusion. Can you maybe explain that process and how that would work?
So the City of Nanaimo has several layers of defense. So obviously we started off by talking about our debt. That's low. That's one layer. The second layer is we have kept some money aside in reserves for emergencies and other projects down the road. Then we have some long-term capital planning, which Brad can speak to. And I've explained this to people. For instance, some have asked and said, what happens if there's an earthquake? And so if there's an earthquake, really you come down to basic survival needs. But at that same time, you also get disaster assistance from other levels of government. And so we have low debt, we have put away some money for emergencies, we can access other funds from other orders of government.
What we have is, for example, reserves are like saving accounts. And so we have a saving accounts for our water, we have saving accounts for our sewer, for our roads, and we have a long-term capital plan. And all the projects that we have there, and we've looked at when do we need to replace things, when do we need to make repairs, and we've planned out 20 years and set aside funds for that.
I don't want to keep going on the concerns of people. I want you to have your say as far as, explaining how this works. Let's talk about the positives that you're saying this will bring to Nanaimo. So addressing that, what is the economic gain that we can have from having an event center in a community our size?
I think I can probably speak to the jobs first, which is not only the original construction jobs that we get, which would be around 700 plus. There's the jobs that are on site and also the off-site jobs, as well as the external spin-off that comes from this. So a lot of the reports have projected a very decent gain of obviously the front-end load at the beginning for the mass construction, but also the businesses that get developed around the area, the internal businesses that are actually to be included in the event center, plus all of the mitigating pieces that come off for the restaurants, the downtown core, bringing people in there to a place where there's not a lot of people right now.
Recreation facilities are not known to make money, and we know that as taxpayers, but we want to have those facilities to utilize for our families and make it a great place to live. How is this different than an actual recreation center, and is there expected to be some kind of return on the investment?
Well, it's a very interesting facility because it's an event center which has as its primary function to hold events for 114, 115 event days per year. And that's important to the business case. So that's where we're seeing the WHL play a third of that time, and the other 2/3 of the time we're going to see family shows, entertainment, music, those types of things. And then the remaining 200 days is what makes it unique, and it makes it possible for the city to program community and neighborhood events. So it's an event center that we're going to market to bring acts and shows to the town, to have hockey, but it's also going to allow us the ability to provide services that we provide in other recreational facilities to our community.
Now, Tracy, you mentioned hockey, and I know that in the Ernst & Young, as well as some other reports, a lot of the key factors, it comes back to, it says you need to have an anchor tenant, such as a Western Hockey League team. What guarantees do we have that that looks like it's going to be a successful option for the City of Nanaimo?
That's a really good question. And two things really need to happen in order for there to be an event center. One, people need to go out and vote, and there needs to be a yes vote. We need the authority to borrow the $80 million. The other thing is we need to get a WHL team. And I can tell that, or I can share with the community that we have a memorandum of understanding with the WHL for the city to get a franchise, a team awarded to play in Nanaimo for 20 years. And we've put that into the memorandum of understanding because it's important to have a long-term commitment. And if we get a yes vote, one of the next things that will happen is we'll start negotiations with the new ownership group of the WHL team and do the terms and conditions of them playing in that center. And it's important to note that the city has preserved its negotiating position. If they're unreasonable and it doesn't make financial sense and it doesn't support the business case we've put forward, then there's not going to be a deal.
That sounds great, sounds promising. There are concerns, though, that will the city, if something like that does go ahead, will they learn from the examples that have happened? Say Abbotsford, they basically built an event center, and then they end up having to pay the team when they left and abandoned because they were paying them on an annual basis to stay there in the first place. So $12.7 million they were hanging for. Will that happen here in Nanaimo?
I think that what we've done, one of the things I'm particularly proud of, is that we've been at this for 6 months. We started negotiating and consulting with the stakeholders in September. So I've been looking at this, and we've had consultants come in and tell us about what's gone well and what's gone wrong in other communities. And some of the mistakes that have been made are certainly what we're taking a look at. We're not going to guarantee the WHL a certain number of seats and a certain thresholds. It's going to be negotiations on fair market, and it has to make sense for both of the parties for them to play here. So we certainly are mindful of some of the challenges other communities have had, but I think our MOU and the direction that we receive from Council has positioned us well to be tough in our negotiations and make sure that whatever we do, it's good for the community.
There have been concerns raised about how this will affect our local Clippers team that's been here for about 50 years. Now, I know the Clippers could not generate the same type of attendance that a Western Hockey League could, but what could it do to them? Has that been looked at?
Yes, it has, and the Clippers are an important part of our community. I'm going to be wearing a Clippers jersey later on today because it's hometown hockey. And they have been in discussions with the WHL, and their leagues have been having discussions. The city isn't privy to those, but they are an important organization, and their future is being discussed by their ownership group with the WHL and their league. And it's my understanding that if we get a yes vote and if the WHL awards us the team, the Clippers would move, and the WHL would play out of Frank Crane for the first couple of years while we're constructing the arena. And there's possibilities and opportunities for the Clipper.
I don't want to dwell on those ones because there's so much to cover in the half hour, and obviously we can't get through all of that. People want to know more about it. There's numerous reports that are out there, as well as looking at the attendance levels for Western Hockey League. Some fear that it's declining population attendance and that, but those are things that people should look into themselves. I want to look also at, with the reports that came back and the review from Ernst & Young, everyone keeps to think that it was based on the best case scenario when you have the maximum attendance, the maximum number of events. Has there been a worst case scenario looked at that would look at what the financial means is for the city to pay for it?
Yes, that's a great question. So the reports that we've put out, there's an appendix there, a couple of pages that address scenarios. So what we had at the end of December, we had what we called a base case. And this was presented by Stafford Sports. They are the biggest consulting firm that builds this kind of events centers across North America. So they provided us with that. So we took that and worked with Ernst & Young to look at several scenarios, the best case, the worst case. So we played around in terms of events and other revenues to see if those were not achieved, how would that look like? And so the best case says we'll break even within the first 3 years. The worst case says we would be looking for probably a subsidy of $200,000 in the first year. So we took that information and tried to compare this with other arenas. And so what we found from studies is that the average across for similar arenas and demographics is that you are within the $500,000 in terms of subsidies. So we are within that range, which gave us comfort that from a business plan and the negotiations that we're going to have, we have a target that we are planning to be within.
There was also in the report suggestions of the operations and management of this, and I don't know if how that would work. There was some reference to possibility of having the same managers of the conference center manage this facility. How would that work, and is that an advantage to the city, or should it be another independent company who knows more about an event center management?
So right now we have two facilities that the city owns, the Port Theatre and the Convention Center. And if we get the Event Center, then there's 3 facilities that the city will own. And I think it's very important that we have a service provider that can coordinate and collaborate. We don't need our facilities competing against one another. So it really makes sense to have a national and international company with a lot of experience in marketing conferences, tourism marketing, destination marketing, and conference and event marketing to be doing that for the city. We hope that it brings not only more conferences to the conference center and shows to the event center, but also tourism, and get people staying overnight. Instead of going to Vancouver or Victoria, coming to Nanaimo and staying here and putting their money into our economy. So absolutely, we're looking at ways that we can find collaboration among all of our facilities.
And what's the explanation for, I mean, a lot of people in the surveys that went out at the very beginning of this, when it was thrown out saying we're going to pursue this option and look at how feasible it is the option of it being a completely private funded facility as opposed to a public-private partnership or the complete public funding that's building it like the City of Nanaimo taxpayers?
So, I thought you were going to take that. So, as of now, the business case that's out assumes that the city will build this. But what we've said in the open house is that the door remains open for partnerships. You can enter into partnerships down the road even after you've built it. We don't have a private sector partner at the table right now. We would welcome one if they were to walk in the door. Public-private partnerships take a number of forms. It could be in operations, it could be at construction, it could be at maintenance. So those options are still on the table and we will still pursue them as we go forward.
Okay, so it's not, everything's not written as a rule book and saying we have to do it this way. Things can be adjusted depending on good or bad. Talking about other potentials that are a concern, is the site itself, because we know it's filled, we know that it's coal, there might be a mine shaft underneath. And what about addressing the concerns of how much it could cost? The report that came out said that there is possible liquefaction that could happen. There is also groundwater because it is tidal. What can you say about that?
The city has done a significant amount of studies, environmental, archaeological, geotechnical. We've owned the site for almost 4 years. So from an environmental contamination perspective, there is some old coal deposits. So we've found those. We've taken a look at remediation options under the provincial regulations and have remediated to a stage that we can get subdivision approval. So the major risks have been addressed. When you then go for a building permit, you then determine how actually you're going to, in this case, risk assessor, manage those soils. So that deals with the environmental contamination. For the geotechnical, we have had that study done as well. And what essentially you do is the coring down to the bedrock, and then you essentially cross beam those for the geotechnical for seismic issues to deal with that. So if there is water egress, ingress, egress through tides, that's not affected by that methodologies. And it's the most common method used now for doing event centers of this size is to make sure that it provides that stability. The other interesting thing for the event center, if we do get a yes vote, if people come out and vote and we proceed with that event center, then it can also be part of the emergency operations center. So in the time of a significant event, it can be a hospital or a housing or other type of emergency facility, and it will be built to the highest seismic standards under the building code today.
And there was 2 recent earthquakes just off of our coast in the last few days. So it is actually on people's minds about how this could withstand, especially being on a tidal plane, and what it would cost to make sure that that will stand in case of such an incident. But that's a whole other discussion as well.
That's one of the things that we've done different. This project, I think for the city, represents one of the first times where we've done more due diligence and information sharing than we have on any other capital project. And that's because we want to get it right. We want to understand what are the costs of getting that site ready and ensuring that we can actually build the facility for the amount that we're saying we're going to build it.
Mm-hmm. Instead of rushing into it, research. You mentioned archaeological, and that brings to mind the Nanaimo First Nation. Do you have the support for this project going forward, seeing as how it is traditionally their lands and it borders on what they would like to do and improve their areas?
So we've been at the negotiating table, we've been at the table with Nanaimo First Nation for the last 12 months. There had been a hiatus for about 5 or 6 years, but the city staff and city elected representatives on a monthly basis are sitting down and talking about what are SFN's interests, what are the types of projects the city wants to do, and sharing a dialogue to understand what their concerns are, what some of their development interests are. Yesterday we spent the entire day over on Newcastle Island or Sesatchin, and that's a project that we're working on together, where we want to be able to build tourism destination facilities over there, honor their culture and honor the history and culture of our community for Nanaimo, the mining and the forestry. So I can say that Chief and Council and Mayor and Council are in a dialogue. They're meeting regularly, and one of the things that we're looking at right now is the impact of putting this facility at One Port Drive, which, like many places throughout the community, they have a traditional village that was located there before.
One Port Drive, that location, and I read the reports on why it was chosen because the city owns the property and that, but some people are asking the question, why can't you take the amount of money and just redevelop Frank Crane Arena and put the center there where there exists to be a number of parking already, the space is already owned by the city in the same instance? Why does it have to be down at Port Place?
One of the critical issues is for these facilities to be located downtown. For the other studies or facilities that we have studied, that's including when I was in Red Deer, it's right out on the outskirts of town, big sea of parking, and you just drive in, park, walk a long way, get in the building. You might, eat something or buy a beer or something in there, and then come out and you get in your car and you go home. There are very limited spin-off benefits for doing this. What we want to provide is that downtown revitalization piece and provide opportunity for people to come in early. They might have a drink, they might do a bit of shopping, they might go for a meal. There's multiple opportunities. The other benefit of spreading out the parking as is proposed is that you don't end up with everyone trying to get through 2 pinch points to get home out of a parking lot. So there's quite a dispersed traffic flow for doing that as well. And the traffic flow is also said it's about a mid-afternoon flow of traffic for that event. So the downtown is really key to have the event centers from all the studies and all the reviews of other events that have occurred.
And if we get a yes vote on this one, we actually have the ability to start 3 of Council's capital priorities. One is the Waterfront walkway. So some of the investment in the site is to prep it, because we're only using 3 acres of the 27. So we're getting that site ready for redevelopment, and a priority will be to extend the walkway. And then we're also getting the South Downtown Waterfront ready to go. And I know you'll show graphics later. You'll see the possibilities that we have down there. There's been some visioning, and we can see some residential, light commercial. It's still going to be a working harbor. We're located right next to the Port Authority, and they've got some projects that they have in mind. But it really allows us to extend the walkway. The Port Authority's expressed interest in us linking them and their helijet, and if they get the foot ferry in pretty soon, and their cruise ships, we're starting to activate that area and get us outside, get us down there.
And I think that following up on that point, the event centers in Kelowna and Kamloops, Prospera Center, and I can't remember the name of the Kamloops area, but if you take a look at where they're located right downtown. So when you walk out of the Kamloops facility, you're right up into the restaurants, you're right up into the shops, you're right up into the park area, you're right up into multi-use areas that'll actually energize that time of day when people normally aren't downtown. So when you get out of a hockey game, you get out of an event, those stores now have another cycle of people coming through that may want to grab dinner, may want to grab a coffee, may want to take a look at some of the facilities that you have downtown when normal traffic wouldn't be there.
I know we've hosted events where we've had 10,000 people show up and be down for a few hours, and the parking has been assimilated, people, the cars, it's worked. The question that maybe is transportation sufficient in our community? We have transportation issues with our buses because not enough use it. They cater to a couple of sector areas where have the most employment, such as the hospital, VIU. Can it handle that as well? Is there negotiations or talks with the Transit Authority to address the concerns?
Sure. So right now some of the studies showing that we have a roughly 97% of the required parking for the facility. What we would be doing is, if there is a yes vote, we would be taking a look at how we manage our parking. So looking at our areas, usually it's about an 800-meter distance where people will park or will walk to a center or an event center. So we're looking at that. We're looking at the Nanaimo Port Authority. I believe there's discussions in with that. Ms. Sammer can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's discussions in with that in regards to them offering up some parking as well. So if we get the yes on that, then what we will be doing is we will be investing that research to make sure that we have the most substantial parking management for not just the big events, the big 8 and also the hockey events, but the smaller events as well, to make sure that the people of downtown can still move around downtown.
You mentioned, Tracy, you're talking about the vision for the South End waterfront area, and there was all those community group meetings that took place a few years ago that asked people what their vision was for it. And I know that some of it does envision the residential expanding, the shops, the retail on the lower floor and that. Can that still be incorporated into this design with that taking up such a huge chunk of that South End area?
I'll let Ms. Fowler respond to that one.
Certainly, as I said, there is, in the visioning boards that we've shown, there's a couple of different options that we've shown, but they do include the mixed-use residential commercial redevelopment on the waterfront portion of the site. There's also the other site that C-SPAN currently owns, and that may be part of the working harbor, maybe some work-live options. So it is consistent with that vision, and it is part of the overall redevelopment of the site, given that Ms. Sammer's already said it's about a 26, 27 acre site, including some of the waterfront pieces, and this event center will take up 3 acres of it. So it really is going to be a key anchor, not only to have a WHL team as an anchor for a facility, but the building be an anchor for the redevelopment of the downtown and providing those spin-off benefits. And really what we were trying to do in a downtown that's an international model is to have the mixed use. So it's going to be an arts and entertainment district which people can live, work, and play in. And particularly with the waterfront walkway and those types of redevelopment and improvement to transit, then we really will achieve that vision.
And I know with the economic growth, it's hoped that, you know, there'll be more high rises, more urban density downtown to sustain a vibrant downtown community. But there's the white elephants in the room here. When we talk about the conference center was supposed to have a hotel that was supposed to be opening up by 2017. It hasn't happened. That site, as I understand, is for sale. How do we know that this is going to bring us that return, encourage that kind of development? I mean, I know it's all guesswork and assumptions, but is there any indication that we will get that hotel that might support this?
So a couple of points to make. So the conference center, the management and the is coming up for renewal. And what Ms. Samra and ourselves have done is to take a second look at how we manage the conference center. What incentives can we work into the contract to make sure that it meets the objectives for which it was built for? And so we are readdressing how that gets managed so we can lower the burden to the taxpayer. Secondly, within the last few months, once we started talking about the event center, we have received a couple of people wanting to build hotels in downtown. So the economics of a hotel in downtown changed through that process. One of the key conditions for building this is to make sure that it's a catalyst. That means it complements, enhances other facilities, being the conference center, the port, theater as well in that regard. So it puts Nanaimo in a place where it can begin to hold larger events. And so that changes how downtown actually functions.
All right. We are actually out of time, and as I said, it'd be quite tough to go through all of the points necessary to discuss this very important issue for the City of Nanaimo. And my point was to try and encourage people to educate themselves about what is being proposed. There are numerous documents available on the city's website, nanaimo.ca. There's the business plan, which was just released a few days ago. And the vote, once again, is March 11th, the referendum. And the most important thing to do is to read up on this, understand, ask questions of your city councillors and staff, and make an educated decision and get out and vote. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be back in a month, and we'll have another topic of concern to you in your neighborhood on Upfront.